But I could just say that was Monica Joseph, who's the Executive Director of the Regional Centre for Strategic Studies. But because we have people coming in and out, do introduce yourself each time. Yes, go ahead, and then I know you're waiting.
Well, Malika, I just want to add a little more to what you have already said. A little effort that we have done in Manipur is actually to recover the humanitarian traditions in our indigenous context. And this was supported by the Red Cross, the International Committee of the Red Cross, which we are extremely grateful. Even though Red Cross is not allowed into that region, they have supported a small project wherein in our traditional combat situations, how in basic principles of humanitarian law, which is like proportionality of use of force, taking your arms openly if you are engaging in conflict, or even wearing your appropriate gear if you are going to engage in a combat. And we had something a little more than what international humanitarian law already has, which is not to hit on your enemy who was already retreating. So the Committee of the Red Cross is extremely excited about this translation work that we have done of our humanitarian tradition, and this was something that we have distributed widely, even to the guerrilla groups, saying that it's not about Geneva Conventions on the rule of wars that was developed. Even our forefathers who were noble warriors, it was not, they were not going around beating up civilians and people who are helpless. But so this is a little effort that we have done, looking deep into the history and trying to recover those values. If we look closely enough to any community, I think there is always dimension to mitigate violence, to try and show a little humanity in the midst of a catastrophe. So one little effort that we have done in Northeast India with support and on the principles of ICRC is to recover this, which was great. And the governor of Manipur, which usually we don't see eye and eye, inaugurated this, and this has been distributed to the guerrilla groups as well as to the armed forces deployed in Manipur. So a little middle ground, you may say, at appealing on humanity on both sides is an effort that the Human Rights Center have undertaken recently.
I think you wanted to speak? Yeah.
Bonita, to what extent are women involved in the guerrilla groups? And to what extent do guerrilla groups have contact with the civilians that they live among?
Thank you. Anyone else want to ask?
Kagan and Charity Security Network in the U.S. My question is about the 10 groups have been listed as terrorists and how that blacklisting process affects civil society's ability to carry out its work in peace building.
None of them are easy questions. And Bonita has given the burden to me. Well, we know there are some groups where their Politburo members are women, but all said and done, there's always, frankly speaking, even though we live in the region, it is always difficult for us to know what exactly is going on in the jungles up there, and for us it is even more important to have a publicly as well as with a matter of conviction to maintain a distance from all of them, so that we will be able to operate from the eyes of the government that you are not exactly in hands in glove with them. This is a constant exercise for any civil society actors in that region. That it is not you have to constantly prove that you are not one of them to be able to operate. And we are actually talking about. And also this branding as terrorist groups and also any kind of, if you try and have regular talks with them, then your capacity to operate becomes minimal. In my part of my small valley called the Imphal Valley is where 6 of them from this 10 comes from. So the intensity of constantly you got to prove that you are not connected to them and your work has nothing to do with their political agenda is something that one has to constantly try and work so that you can. So that's a constant pressure in us. I don't know whether this answers your several questions, but yeah.
Oh yes. Do you want to respond? I'm Anjuman Ara Begum. I also come from the same region, and I'm a researcher based in Guwahati and also working in college. Just a little bit, I will share because I'm doing a research on sexual violence and impunity in Northeast India. I just wanted to share because it came up with the questions. How it is used as a weapon of war. For example, I give you, there should not be impunity for cases of sexual violence. In all the cases that we have documented, there is no investigation, and what happens once a rape is committed by the armed forces, immediately the next day they will transfer, and the police later on what they will reply that we could not locate the perpetrator. But it's Indian Army. Government know who are they, where they are transferred, but the trial is denied. In no law in India has said that during any counterinsurgency operation, sexual violence will be, it will be pardoned, it will not be. But why this is the case? She has mentioned, in only one case we have found that the compensation has been given. That is also only the monetary compensation, the few thousand rupees. And also there are cases of mass rape cases. Like in one night you will see that whole village or 50 women have been raped in some particular village. And there is no documents related to it. Even when we use Right to Information Act to assess those information, like what happened to those cases, what is the status of those cases, still police say that we don't have information or we could not do anything. Just the version of police. And recently last year, there was a gang rape of deaf and dumb women, and we went to the place, we interviewed the army commander, we talked to them. They said they are taking all the measures, everything will be taken out, but after some time we came to know that that group, whole platoon has been transferred to some other place and police are not doing any investigation. And later on, when High Court has recently taken up the cases after 10 months and has ordered for investigation. So this is the study in all the cases you will find, except the very one or two cases. So this is how the system goes on. And about another question, like you asked, like the difference between ethnic groups, how they can bring it into. I would just like to give some policies that we have. Like in Northeast India, we have the certain policy called 6th schedule status. Certain communities are given their autonomy, to carry out their own traditional way of culture and everything. There's a certain area, it's designated as autonomous area, where they can have their own political space, their own area, everything, criminal laws and everything will be controlled by the local authority. So in that particular area, the autonomous area, they don't recognize the rights of the other group, So there emerges the other kind of conflict. The communities who are minority in this area, they are even fighting for their status, for their rights. So there are certain policies which the government should review, how much it is contributing towards the peace or against the peace. Thank you so much.
I would just like to add on that even in Northeast India we have this customary law and it is recognized by the Constitution of India. So then it is very difficult for the civil society to intervene in this kind of cases of the sexual violence and all. And because the customary the laws, these are they're recognized by the Constitution, and the people feel they're more comfortable on that. This is their identity. So the other progressive laws are not applied on that. So sometimes it is very difficult for the civil society organization to intervene when it comes this kind of cases and challenging the customary laws.
Andrew Tomlinson from the Quaker UN office, and thank you to our speakers. Clearly the situation in Northeast India has been challenging for many decades. The question arising in my mind is what has changed specifically in the context of the global war on terror? So what has happened particularly since 9/11 over the last 10, 11 years, that has, the title is The Shrinking Space. It implies that there has been a change, and I think I would certainly find it helpful to understand what particular elements of the situation now are due to that sort of global overlay and the use of those languages and those approaches. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for focusing it down to the specifics. The first response from the government of India, of course, is the enactment of the Prevention of Terrorism, POTA, Prevention of Terrorism Act, which is not just 9/11 here, but also the parliament attack in New Delhi. But that was a time when BJP was in power, so there was a lot of criticism from the Congress-led party, and therefore when Congress came to power in 2004, and also there was a lot of criticism from the democratic forces in the country, this was amended. And the key elements of it is already incorporated into Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which is an act of 1967 vintage. So in India as a whole, there is a kind of a rhythm. This has been going on since emergency, that repressive law, democratic forces, and then on one crisis, again a more repressive law, and it goes back. It has been going back and forth. What is unfortunate is the inability of the Indian democratic forces to empathize with what is happening in the Northeast, and therefore laws like the Armed Forces Special Powers Act continue to inhabit. The next shock in India was 2008 when this Mumbai attack on Taj, and this resulted into an amendment of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and also constituting a new apparatus called the National Investigation Agency, which is looking at the, even though the attack in Mumbai was done by what is considered as Pakistan-instigated Islamic groups, what is interesting is these apparatuses which were created out of the Mumbai episode actually are most active in the Northeast India, and there's no civil society voice to kind of hit it back. And therefore, now in my hometown we have the NIA office, which people are questioning the constitutional validity of it because it is basically a central agency, and law and order is a state subject, and there are criticisms. Now this is going to be further consolidated into what is called NCTC, National Center for Counterterrorism, which is now being debated. And unfortunately, in the Northeast, our politicians are so weak and unable to articulate this, but states like Tamil Nadu or West Bengal have strongly come up against the central government for violating the federal principles. How can possibly the Intelligence Bureau and Center take over the entire counterterrorism measures in the state, which anyway doesn't have the local knowledge and the expertise? Whereas I think the Home Minister, people say, are modeling this on the US model, but in US you have a federal crime, whereas that concept doesn't exist in Indian constitutional jurisprudence. But anyway, because we have to be in the bandwagon of counterterrorism, and therefore all these institutions, the level of surveillance have increased many fold. So all our emails, telephone, everything is censured. They're using, I think, international cooperation. It has also changed because many of the safe places for the guerrillas to operate in, it started with Bhutan, with joint operations in Bhutan, and then it happened in Bangladesh. Now people are talking with the change that's coming in Burma, a similar kind of operation. This has its own huge impact in the operations of the civil society space also. The pressure from the guerrilla groups increases to operate, and therefore this step also brought about a sea change in the whole climate, the political climate there. Some have entered into negotiation. There are still diehards who are saying that unless sovereignty is on the agenda, we are not going to come out like the political faction. So it does have a huge impact. And the urgency of India to open up this region for the new Look East policy of larger integration with Southeast Asia and perhaps with China, the new Asian highway and the Asian railway coming in is making the situation quite an urgent. The urgency of the whole thing is becoming higher and higher.
George, I don't think. Okay, last opportunity then, last round of questions. Any remaining?